UK directors like you make mistakes when it comes to closing a limited company, and it's because you don't always understand the process or the common traps that are going to cause you personal problems later on down the line. Now in this video, I'm going to walk you through a 6-step system that the top 1% of directors have used to deal with business insolvency and to make sure that they don't lose anything personally. Now this is the same approach that I have helped thousands of directors with over the years. Now the first thing that I want to talk to you about is how the top 1% use numbers to make better decisions in the business. Now the problem as I see it is directors call me in a panic and they don't actually know what's going on in the finances in the business. They don't know the numbers, and without the basics, it's almost impossible to make decent decisions. So the first things that we need to know to be able to help somebody are really simple. Who do you owe money to? How much do you owe? Is it suppliers, loans, where have you signed PGs? Next question is, who owes you money? What does your debtors list look like? Is it all likely to come in? Is any of it bad debt? What's the period of time before you can start collecting this money in? You know, what does your current profit and loss show? Do you have an up-to-date balance sheet? And for a lot of directors, they'll say, oh, Chris, I haven't really got all that information. I've got my last set of accounts. Now, the problem with it being a last set of accounts is it's old. It's like a snapshot of your business at some point in the past. And on its own, it is about as much use as a chocolate teapot when you're trying to make decisions in your business today. So if you're not doing a monthly profit and loss, how can you tell whether your business is actually making any money? How can you tell whether there's any real profits so you can start taking dividends from that business? Now, running a business without clear financial oversight is it's like driving a car blindfolded. It's only a matter of time before something's going to crash. Now, the top 1% have got up-to-date financial reporting, and it doesn't matter whether they turn over 100 grand a year or 10 million. They've got a finance function, and that will change depending on what size of business that they have. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be the basics of having a bookkeeper for a few £100 a month and software like, I don't know, Xero, QuickBooks or Free Agent. And then once a month, the director is given a profit and loss and a balance sheet. And the profit and loss is, right, are we making money? Is performance dipping? Going through that P&L line by line, checking whether costs are spiralling out of control or not. What I also see the top 1% use is a rolling cash flow. And really simple, that's what's coming in, what's coming out. And with a cash flow, you can spot problems early. And obviously, the earlier that you spot problems, the more options that you've got. I want you to think of good financial reporting like a suit of armour, because it can help the risk of being accused by an insolvency practitioner that you're trading insolvently. It can minimise the chances of an overdrawn director's loan account. I'm going to come back to that later in the video, really, really important part. And it's going to show you exactly, if your business stops making money, you need to stop taking dividends. And another thing clear financial reporting is going to do, it's going to help you stop taking on personally guaranteed debt when it's not the right thing to do. And I have spoken to thousands of directors over the years, and the lesson is pretty simple. The top 1% use real-time numbers and they act early. Now, I'm going to talk to you about why leaving things too late to get advice can leave you with no options at all. Now, as soon as your business becomes insolvent, and all that means is you can't pay your liabilities when they fall due, or your liabilities are higher than your assets, something really big changes. And the top 1% understand that a director's responsibilities change the minute the company becomes insolvent. Like from that point on, your job isn't to put yourself first, or even to put your business first. It's to put the creditor's interests ahead of everyone else. And this is the type of behaviour and understanding that shows an insolvency practitioner that you've behaved responsibly. Now, the mistake most directors make is delay getting advice. And they'll say stuff to themselves like, I'll get through it. If I actually call one of these insolvency people, I'm almost signing my own death warrant. It will mean that I've failed. I understand that, by the way, because I've been where you're at. Originally, the reason I got into this industry, I'm not an accountant who took a wrong turn. I put a business through an insolvency process many, many years ago. And I did not want to take advice at the start. I didn't want to admit that the problem was bad. I was the kind of guy who thought, well, I figured everything else out on my own. I'll be able to get through this. And it's just not true, that the nonsense I was sort of saying to myself. Let me give you an idea, right? I get about 500 inquiries into this business a month. And we probably do about 50 insolvency processes that we assist with. So roughly 90% of the people who contact us don't have to end up closing their company. Now, the earlier that you take some advice, the more options that you've got. And a good insolvency advisor, their first remit will be, is there any way I can help this director avoid insolvency? Now, you, not just you, a lot of people hear the word insolvency and they assume it only means one thing: I've got to shut down the business. But if you reach out at the first warning signs and they're like, you can't pay a bill when it's due, you've got a time to pay arrangement with HMRC and it's failed, or you can't pay suppliers when you're supposed to, well, you've got multiple options. You can do informal arrangements with creditors, like a time to pay. You can look at something called a company voluntary arrangement, which is a more formal insolvency process, and it'll allow you to restructure debts over a period of time. You can look at a rescue process like administration, or you can do something like a pre-pack sale. Now, these are options that most directors don't even know exist, and when they do find out, it can be too late. Now, the top 1% get specialist advice as soon as insolvency is possible, okay? Because they know a couple of things. First of all, taking advice protects creditors and it reduces the damage. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly for you that are watching there, it protects them as directors because it shows that they've acted responsibly and they didn't bury their head in the sand. And you know what? Sometimes the best advice is actually keep carrying on trading. I mean, I have it all the time where someone will ring me. I had a guy call me yesterday. He's spoken to loads of insolvency people. They're all telling him to liquidate. And it's because he's failed a time to pay arrangement. And there's a chance HMRC won't accept his next move. But basically, he was paying them 20 grand a month. And for the next 3 months, he needs to reduce it to 10 grand a month. So I've said, listen, you speak to HMRC, you put together a new proposal for them, but I don't think this guy is going to need to go into liquidation. I think he's going to be able to trade through it. And that was my advice to him. But at least from your point, if you've spoken to like a insolvency practitioner, okay, or a qualified insolvency advisor, then at least you're speaking to somebody in a professional capacity who can understand your position. Now, obviously, I'm not an insolvency practitioner, but I work with many insolvency practitioners that I've worked with over the years. Remember, my job is there to support you and give you advice from a director's point of view. In fact, anything I've said to you so far today makes you think, you know what, I need to speak to this guy. If you go to the description, there's a link at the top of the comment section. Put your details in. One of my team will call you today. We're free. We're independent. We've got, I think, about 750 five-star reviews on Trustpilot. Nobody touches us on reviews. But perhaps you don't want to talk to somebody. There's a link underneath that will give you a free guide to insolvency. And all I want off you is an email address so I can stay in touch with you in the future. Okay? Now, I want to talk to you about how the 1% protect the family home when it comes to insolvency. And I see this all the time. A director will call me. We go through the creditor list and I realise that they've signed loads of personal guarantees. And the reason why I want to dig into this, because most of the time they've signed these PGs without proper advice. They're signing PGs with no clear financial forecasting. They're doing it pretty much to keep the business going just one more month. And I think when directors sign these PGs, it never crosses their mind that the family home could be something that they lose. That they're trying their best. And that's what makes it so scary. Now, what the 1% do differently, the top 1% don't sign PGs on hope because they know exactly where the business stands at any one moment. They've got up-to-date numbers. They've got forecasts. And if they do take a personal guarantee on, the question that they ask themselves is pretty solid. They say, is this funding going to actually save the business? Is this funding going to help the business grow? Or is it just kicking the can down the road? Because listen, sometimes taking on debt is good. And if you are taking on debt to grow your business, make an acquisition, buy stock, ride a wave, of course the lender is going to want to see you've got some skin in the game. But the brutal truth is, the minute you sign a personal guarantee, you can turn this company problem into a personal problem. And I see it too many times where a director's taking on a PG to pay a supplier, to make another month's payroll. Basically keep HMRC quiet for a few more weeks. But they're doing it on the back of a gut feeling, on the back of a fact packet calculation. They're not using real numbers to make these decisions. And the top 1% of people, they don't gamble like this. They don't hope the way out of a problem. And they definitely don't convert limited liability debt into personal debt that could put the family home at risk. And it's sad because I've seen over the years good, honest directors gambling the family home to survive another few months in a business in the hope that things will turn around. And listen, the rule's this. You've got to be 100% confident your business is going to survive before you start signing PGs. And if you've already signed PGs, don't sign another one until you've taken some proper advice. Please, 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 please. You've got limited liability debt there. When you start to sign PGs to pay that debt, that limited liability debt is becoming personal debt for you and you'll lose that protection. Now I'm going to tell you about something the 99% do that feels good in the moment, but it almost always comes back to bite you on the arse later on. And it's when your company's insolvent, okay, so remember, you can't pay debts when they fall due, liability is more than your assets, you're not allowed to prefer one creditor over another one, okay? But what many directors will start doing is they'll pay the person who shouts the loudest. Or worse off, they think, oh, I've got a PG on that loan, I'm going to pay that loan off because I've personally guaranteed it. This is classed as a preference. And if you do this and then your company goes into an insolvency process, the insolvency practitioner is going to look at what's happened and they can come after you personally for those payments that you've made. And what the top 1% understand is every payment they make after becoming insolvent is going to be scrutinised. So before they make any payments, they ask the question, does this payment benefit the creditors as a whole? Okay, let me give you an example. Construction company. You've got a job that's nearly finished. You've got a supplier demanding payment and you've got some subbies chasing you. Now, if you pay the supplier and the subbies, you're going to be able to finish the job. You're going to be able to bring more money into the pot. Now, that's justifiable if you pay them because it improves. Let's say you've got to pay 15 grand to bring 20 grand into the pot. Well, doing that payment improves the outcome for creditors overall, okay? But if you try and be noble and you start paying an old supplier, with a last bit of cash just because you feel guilty, or worse still, because you want to sort them out because you want to trade with them in a new company, that can be one of the most dangerous things that you do. Now, the lesson here is this. Once a company becomes insolvent with no real prospect to recovery, you've got to take a breath, pause payments, and take advice before you decide who gets paid and why. Now, next, I'm going to talk to you about the single biggest issue for UK directors in 2026. And this is the one that causes the most stress, and it can cost the most money, right? Now, when a company goes into an insolvency process, the insolvency practitioner has got to review directors' conduct, basically seeing how they've behaved as a director. They've got to identify and try to realise assets in the company to repay creditors as much as they can. And you probably understand that assets are tables, chairs, machinery, maybe some money owed in. But one of the most common assets that they look at, that most directors don't even realise exist, is something called an overdrawn director's loan account. And it's basically where over time, if you've got an overdrawn loan account, you've taken more money out of the company than you were entitled to. And here's the bit that catches directors out every single day. Once that insolvency practitioner is appointed, their job is to review all the transactions since those last set of accounts, and any money that you've taken as a dividend when the company wasn't in a position to pay the dividend can be reclassified and added to your director's loan account. And it's their job to actually pursue you for it. So they're going to make you personally liable for that director's loan account. Now, the top 1% see this problem coming. I keep saying it on the video. They keep up-to-date financial information. So they reconcile that director's loan account regularly, and they make sure that if they've incurred any personal expenses, they get it allocated on that business. They also understand that before they enter an insolvency process, they want this director's position to be clear, okay? And they deal with it up front. Instead of waiting for an insolvency practitioner to send a formal letter demanding thousands of pounds after they're appointed, because that's what they do. The job is to come at you for this overdrawn director's loan account. What the top 1% do is they address it up front. They understand it. And listen, I've been doing this for a long time. And here's what I know to be absolutely true. If you are organised and proactive with the director's loan account, it almost always leads to a better outcome for you, the director. Because, okay, the insolvency practitioner's got a duty to try and recover as much of this director's loan account as possible. But you know what? They've also got the discretion to negotiate a settlement as long as that settlement is in the best interests of creditors. So the top 1% prepare properly. They basically, first of all, reconcile the director's loan account so they understand how much they owe the company. And then they put together a clear summary of what their financial position is, you know, a list of their assets, what their liabilities are, what's the house worth, what's the mortgage. And what they do is they put together an explanation of what they can realistically afford, and they propose a repayment plan. This is what we help people with. Because if you offer a better outcome to an insolvency practitioner than what they'd likely get through bankruptcy, there's a blooming good chance that that settlement will be agreed. Now, the lesson here is don't hide from an overdrawn director's loan account. You need to put the effort in to understand your position, and you can usually get a realistic idea of what a settlement might look like. Now, I just want to throw this out there, right? An insolvency practitioner can't make a formal decision until they're appointed, okay? Because once they're appointed, they've got to do all the investigation work, they've got to check the bank statements, they've got to check your balance sheet. But for me, if you disclose everything early and you approach it properly and sensibly, you can remove a huge amount of the uncertainty about what that liability might be. Now, I've done this job for over 10 years. If you disclose to me everything that you've got personally that needs to be protected, and we understand how much your director's loan account is, I've got a good idea of what type of settlement will be acceptable from the insolvency practitioner. And the final lesson that I want to leave you with today is this. The top 1% don't choose an insolvency practitioner based on what their cheapest upfront fee is. Here's what the 99% of business owners do. They'll ring around and they ask something like this. Right, company's insolvent, how much is it going to cost to go into insolvency? But they don't realise that the answer to that question is generally just the headline figure. You know, we hear it all the time. People call us, oh, I've been quoted £3,000 to liquidate, Chris, or £5,000 plus VAT and nothing else. Listen, the headline figure of this, what is called the statement of affairs, the cost to get you into liquidation, is never genuinely the full picture. It's never normally the final figure. You know, on top of this, you might have business assets that you actually want to purchase from the insolvency practitioner. Well, they need valuing and you need to pay a fair market value for them. We've talked about earlier, there's an overdrawn director's loan account, that's going to be pursued. You're going to have to make some type of settlement on that DLA. There's all these things you've got to consider. And what the 1% do instead, they understand the total cost, the total exposure for them personally, not just the cost to liquidate. So they get clarity on things like, well, if I want to buy the assets back, what am I going to have to offer for the assets? How long am I going to be able to pay these for? Because a lot of insolvency practitioners will let you buy assets back and they'll give you some terms as long as you are paying a fair market value for those assets. Remember, before you make an appointment, you want to get a realistic sense of what a settlement on your overdrawn director's loan account might be, if you've got a director's loan account. And the top 1% don't commit to anything until they understand the process, they understand the risks, and they've had all the questions answered. And obviously, I've got to throw this in, the top 1% avoid the too good to be true crowd. The top 1% ignore those. Anyone who promises you, we're going to make your debts disappear, don't worry about anything. All the lot that say, listen, we're going to buy your business for £1 and you can walk away into the sunset. The top 1% prioritise the reputation and they prioritise peace of mind and legal safety over a cheap quote and a sales pitch. So the lesson's this. Don't do anything until you've had all your questions answered, you've got all the key points in writing, and you understand the full process and what's expected of you as a director. And then, and only then, you make an informed appointment of an insolvency practitioner and you choose one you can actually work with, confident there's going to be no nasty surprises down the line. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. But if you want to understand more about what you should be doing before you liquidate a business, I want you to go and watch that video there. It'd be really helpful. And if you've got any questions, drop them in the section and I'll answer them personally. Thanks for your time, Chris Worden.